Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. April is Stress Awareness Month, and so today we're going to talk about how to learn to stress less and how to understand our stress and how to manage it effectively. I think that's the secret sauce for everyone. So welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Marissa Frieder, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for Workable NYC. And we're very fortunate today to be joined by Katie Stefanski from the New York City Employee Assistance Program. And before I turn it over to Katie, I just want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about Workable NYC, who we are and what we do. So Workable NYC is the city's worksite wellness program. And basically, we're here to make sure that you can live well and work well. And so our goal is to create workplaces that make it easier for people to live healthy and active lifestyles. And when we think about health, we know it's not just the absence of disease. We know that our health is physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's financial, and health exists on a spectrum. And so we want to be here for you with health and well-being resources and programs and support, no matter where you are in your health journey, to help you move more, eat well, be well, and take action to prevent disease. And so today's webinar is one of several webinars that we're hosting this year on various topics to help you work well and live well. And I just want to flag that we have added a new webinar to our list as part of our new Project XYZ initiative. So we hope you will join us next Wednesday for another webinar on decluttering and how decluttering can help your mental health. You know, cleaning and organizing often seems just like another thing to add to your to-do list, but clearing out the clutter can actually help to reduce stress. So it's a great continuation after what we're going to talk about today. And so I'm going to dive into today's presentation and turn it over to Katie, who's a counselor with our EAP program. So welcome, Katie.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope that today's presentation, albeit a webinar that we're not physically in each other's presence, that we're going to do as many different activities to help put stress management in practice throughout the next hour. So participate as much or as little in the exercises as works for you. And we're going to jump in right away with practicing a little bit of mindfulness. So I'm guessing that most people are at their workstations, or if you're in a conference room doing this webinar with each other, see if you can close your eyes or look down at your lap and find a bit of checking in. I'll lead us through for the next minute or so a bit of mindfulness. So with that, first an invitation to check into your body sensations. Let's start with feeling your feet on the floor or feeling your legs, your bottom in the chair. Notice what parts of your body are touching the chair, and notice the parts of your body that are surrounded by space. As most of us hold tension in our necks and our shoulders, check in with those places and notice the sensations that are there. As we do this practice, you may have your attention wander. That's okay. Just notice that it's wandered, and almost like a rubber band being stretched, see if you can bring the rubber band back to a neutral position. It's human to have our minds wander. So from there, then notice what you're thinking about. If you can do so non-judgmentally, of noticing almost like you're reading something on a movie screen, you're slightly detached from it. And then with that same check-in process, notice what you're feeling in this moment. Emotionally, maybe you have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, some curiosity, agitation, boredom, whatever it may be. And then begin to wiggle your toes or another part of your body. Move in whatever way you can. Blink your eyes open and rejoin the group. Oh. So we're going to do a poll to see what are the common stressors that people have. Usually when we do some mindfulness practice, people notice, they're like, oh yeah, like that example of stress is in my body or in my thoughts. So Marissa's going to facilitate here a quick poll to see what's the most common expression of stress.
All right, so momentarily you will see a poll on your screen that says, the question is, how do you know that you are stressed? And so take a moment to answer. You can click on as many options apply to you, whether it's your body, your mood, your thoughts, or how you act. If maybe you find a behavior and you're like, okay, when I'm doing that, I know I'm stressed.
Speaking about stress cleaning.
All right, I'll give you guys just one more moment. Right, so it seems like a lot of people find their stress in their body. 62% of us say that their body shows their stress, but the vast majority of us, it's our emotions and our mood that show our stress. Seems like we have a range of the different answers, but emotion and mood are the top choice. So hopefully some of the tools that Katie's going to teach us today will help us to manage our emotions and kind of catch us in that mood and see how we can decrease our stress.
Right on. Thanks, Marissa. So for some of us, our bodies do give us that clue to being stressed. I think most of us are familiar with stress headaches or neck pain. Maybe less frequently we realize that our digestion actually decreases when we're stressed because our body's so amped up to be in that fight or flight mode. And if there's, a saber-toothed tiger chasing us, we need to not worry about whether the hamburger in our belly is digested, but whether or not our muscles are ready to be active and our heart is beating fast and we've got that shallow breathing. So even though saber-toothed tigers aren't hanging out in your office, or at least I hope they're not, we still have those historic signs of being stressed. For others of us, it's emotional signs like the poll indicated. For some, it's moodiness or maybe being prone to melancholy or anxiety. For others, it can look like agitation or anger, passive aggressive, or just straight up aggressiveness. Part of that's how we're socialized in our families, socialized in gender roles in our community. And part of it is also just our personal temperaments. Intellectually, I think it's worth noting that when we get to a certain state of stress, we'll get tunnel vision, that it's all we can think about is this particular problem, and we may actually not be seeing the answers or possible solutions to the situation because we're perseverating or going over the same things. It also is kind of, it can be frustrating too that we're just not at our A game for thinking clearly. We may have foggy thinking or an inability to focus. So what we'll also be practicing in today's webinar are some ways to kind of counteract that. And then of course there are behavioral signs of being stressed, like what are we doing, what are our actions? Some of us tend to isolate or shut down, just stay at our workstation and like go into like hibernation mode of the bare minimums. Others of us may drink more, smoke more, use illicit drugs. Some of us may overdo things, and again, that's where the cleaning comes in. I know I'm not the only one out there who feels like if my physical environment is in order, somehow that's going to solve the other problems that I have less control over. So with that in mind, if those are the clues of what we're stressed, let's just take a moment to kind of check in about what stress is itself. Basically, stress is both the psychological and the physiological response to events that have upset our balance. What's worth, recognizing and affirming is that it's individual, and it also is kind of context specific. So you could be finding yourself to kind of be off balance with a particular work item that you've done before, but this time your elderly mother is sick, or your dog has just passed, or like that the context has changed. Stress also is inevitable. It actually helps us to some degree to perform our best. If you're looking at people who are athletes, and when they go through a trial run of something or practice, it's never as good as when they're at the Olympics or when they're actually like competing generally, because there's a good amount of cortisol can be helpful. And an abundance of that then can be detrimental. So our bodies can start breaking down if we have too much stress over time. So that then just leads us into the next slide, which is going to show you a graphic of just the different body systems that can be affected by stress. And basically, stress can affect both neurotransmitters and hormones, which then are found throughout your body or affect your body systems. And long-lasting can lead to various diseases, right? So maybe even just talking about stress has gotten you fired up, or maybe you've come into this webinar already fired up. It's Wednesday, midday, so there's plenty of fodder perhaps to the fire of stress in your life. So let's get to it and practice another stress management technique. Breathing is a body hack, if you will. When we breathe in shorter than we exhale, or better said, I guess, is when we exhale longer than our inhale, we actually activate the parasympathetic or the calming nervous system. So we're going to practice this for a minute or so. If you breathe in through your nose, perhaps picturing breathing in flowers or a scent that you appreciate, and then breathing out your mouth as if you're blowing out a candle, a dandelion puff. That's going to bring in that parasympathetic nervous system response, the calming nervous system. So let's practice that for 5 breaths at your own pace. And with that exhale, you may want to encourage your belly button to come in towards your spine to really get rid of that excess air, to then bring in a deeper breath. Let's take one more breath. So this might be a strategy that you could use when you come into a meeting after being agitated about an email exchange, or you took a personal call, and then you have to go back to work, right? This is a fairly quick strategy. So let's go back to the poll and see what are some of the common stressors that you are experiencing in your life.
All right, so again, you'll see the poll on your screen, and check any or all of the stressors that you identify with. All right, we'll give you a couple moments just to respond. We know it's multiple choice, so there may be things on there that, things that stress you that aren't listed here, but I imagine these are some common stressors for many of us. So let's see. So let's see, 75% of us find some stress in our jobs, whether it's high workload, dealing with challenging colleagues, so forth. Followed closely by finances. About 70% of us find stress in our finances. Also families and relationships. I mean, really, I'm seeing, everyone has a stressor. And so Katie, tell us, I guess, how that compares to what you see at the EAP.
Yeah, so I think full stop, living in New York City is stressful. Add to that our personal lives, having kids, being a part of a family, having pets, neighbors, weather, and then there's always the commute. You know, what is MTA doing today, or where's the parking space for your car? And the finances of living in New York City are very challenging. And then you come to work, right? All of that's before you even show up at work, and then you've got your work. So at the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, we hear that the top workplace stressors really are about increased work demands, that the unit has been downsized in employees and the work remains the same or increased, that there's a conflict with coworkers and supervisors. We often don't pick who we're working with, and just even in our systems where we do pick who we are with, that we're human and we disagree with people. That there's limited resources to do the duties that are being asked. Time and leave concerns. So people having childcare difficulties, or the commute is challenging, or there's been a health situation that then when you come to work or having a leave to get to take care of those things can be challenging. And then working with community members who are at risk or in crisis. Many of our agencies in the city do direct service work with people who are vulnerable and not in the best way. And so that also vicariously can impact us. So thinking of those causes of stress, how do you typically respond to stress? I'm guessing you're like most of us, that you've tried ignoring it. Maybe you've judged yourself for being stressed, or maybe you fight it, where it's like, I'm not stressed, like I should be able to do this. What I'd like to introduce is an idea of workability. So most of the things that we do on the short run would work just fine. I'll be honest, I was raised in Wisconsin. I love myself some dairy. There's nothing like ice cream. But if I would have ice cream every time I'm stressed, my work office freezer would be full. And I would probably be calorically challenged, and my weight would be a major concern. And on top of that, I'm not really living the values of what else is important to me other than not being stressed. So this concept of workability is, in the long run, does a stress management strategy lead you to the kind of life that you want to live? Does it lead you towards your values? So some of the strategies that people have shared in the past that are workable is talking with a friend or therapist, listening to music if music is important to them. Some people go to a yoga class. Some people go to the mosque, a temple, a church. Some people volunteer and give back and keep things in perspective in that way. So again, we're going to go from that to practicing another strategy. I'd like for you to think of a workplace situation that has brought you some stress. Maybe it's something that has made it difficult to focus, feeling overwhelmed with a variety of tasks. So the idea is, what if we would practice every now and then having a little bit of focus? I think in general, too, it's worth noting that our cell phones have trained our brains to constantly multitask and not be able to focus in a really significant way. So this is to counter that and to say, in a neutral environment, when we are particularly stressed, to take moments in our day to check in and to pay attention. So you pick an item to focus on. You focus on that item, pretty self-explanatory, but then your mind is going to wander. Again, that's a human thing. What the practice is actually, what do you do when it wanders? Do you notice that you've wandered? And can you come back to the thing? Can you let it go, whatever your mind wandered to, and come back to what you're focusing on? And applied in a neutral environment, let's say you're taking a drink from a water bottle, when you do that, to focus on the sensation of drinking the water. Maybe your mind's going to wondering about the water quality, or the office politics about the water source in your room, in the office, or whatever. Noticing that and coming back. Some people do this by focusing on their breath. Some people do this by focusing on music, playing music, listening to music, singing. Some people do this by looking at an object. It could be a religious icon. It could be a candle flame. It could be a picture of the outdoors, such as the one on the slide, or perhaps a picture of your family or an important moment of your life. Some people do this by repeating a word or a phrase, a mantra, a prayer, an intention, and having that be the focus. So let's practice this for a moment. Perhaps around your workstation, you have a picture you would want to use. Perhaps it's just looking at an item on your desk. Perhaps it's noticing sounds in your environment. But let's take a moment to practice that focusing. And again, our minds will wander, but see if you can know and give yourself some compassion that, yeah, it's going to happen. So let's just, when it happens, come back, come back, come back. So notice what you're paying attention to and return back to the point of your focus. And then slowly bring your awareness back to the webinar. So we've covered just your personal examples of what stress is like in your body, what maybe some of the causes are for your stress. We've begun to practice some strategies, and we're going to move more into the practical strategy components now. Just a reminder that, stress can't be eliminated, but it really can be managed. And part of that is our ability to kind of surf the wave of stress, to have some agility and flexibility. That may look different at different times. The idea of stress management can also give us a sense of control in what might be a challenging situation. And certainly there's no one size fit all for stress. I know in our office alone, things that I do would probably drive my colleagues bonkers to control or work with their stress, and vice versa. So there are some tried and true stress management tools that I would be remiss to not mention. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them because I feel like these are commonly spoke of, and what I'd like to focus more on are a couple of tweaks that you can make that I believe would have some significant impact. But so to kind of look at some of those tried and true ones for lifestyle changes, getting enough sleep. I know that I have a family. I like to stay up late, and I also like to get up early. That doesn't leave a lot of time for sleep. But when our bodies don't have time to rejuvenate, our physical body systems tend to break down, and also our mood gets really wonky. Try pulling an all-nighter and then spending time at the office. It's not gonna go well. Looking then at the next slide of some things that we could do to meet our challenges is looking at, especially at the office, managing your time. I think we often hear this. One suggestion would be to think about what is the optimal time of day to do some of those most stressed tasks. I know in our office, Wednesday mornings tends to be a quiet time. I spend that time doing my most heavy intensive thinking and writing. I check emails at times that are loud in the office, or when I know that I'm going to be not completely my most optimal, because I know I can respond cordially and appropriately in an email in that state. I also would say to part of time management would just be consider chunking your email responses. I know Outlook is set up to constantly be pinging you like your text messages. And while technology can give you that option, you can also rein in the technology to say, or your attention to say, I'll check this once an hour, or I'll check this every 3 hours, if that's part of your job duties, to be able to do that and not respond immediately. It's just a better use of our time, and then we aren't constantly toggling between things and losing our focus and getting frustrated in the process. The reality is that there's only 24 hours in the day, despite what my magic wand would want it to be, and that we can't do it all. And many of us may be perfectionists or believe or have been taught that perfection is worth striving for, but perfection doesn't exist. And so having realistic expectations of what is the goal, and also what might that really look like. When we're living our values, we're moving towards something, and it's not something that we can like check off the list of like, I'm a good worker today, or I'm a good parent today. It's like, no, that's a work in progress. And so to kind of frame it in that way, that we're always moving towards it, and we're going to slip up. We're human. So then if those are some of the tried and true, what I want to look at again are those small tweaks that may have really big impact. So we've begun to use working with our breath, and we've done something called extended exhales. There's also something called alternate nostril breathing, which some of you may have practiced. I think Hillary Clinton made it fairly popular during her campaign or afterwards, where somehow a lot of people started talking about it. That's a helpful strategy to rebalance. Another one, some people do a breathing technique of breathing in on a count of 4, and then breathing out for a count of 6, and slowly working the number up so that you get longer inhales and longer exhales. On a most basic level, what that could look like too is if you take your left hand and make it into a high 5, so extend your fingers out. And then with your right hand, the index finger, starting at the base of that left thumb, on the inhale, trace to the tip of your thumb. And as you exhale, go down into the valley. Inhale up to the tip of your index finger. Exhale down. And so proceed at your own pace doing this to the end of your hand. So this can be a helpful strategy, particularly if you work with kids, that you need a moment and they also need a moment. It can be a helpful strategy to have something to ground you of the sensation of touch. That our minds may wander when people say, well, just take a couple deep breaths. You're like, yeah, well, I can't even concentrate on my breath right now. This is like, all right, well, let's go to something that might be grounding, of actually feeling that breath, the coordination of movement with breath. So another small tweak that we've begun to cover is refocusing our thinking. You can use that single pointed focus that we've practiced, or a general mindfulness practice that may look like doing formal meditation. Some people practice mindful eating, of saying, okay, before I gobble down my lunch or breakfast at my workstation, what if I actually taste the first full bite? And to pay attention to the texture and the smells and the flavors. And then if gobbling has to happen, which again, I'm human, I do it too, It can happen, but that we actually take a moment to be mindful of what we're eating. Some people practice refocusing their thinking by doing walking meditation, using one breath per foot strike, and using the movement of our feet to be the point of focus. I suppose you could do this also in a wheelchair, that with one rotation of the wheel or one push, a similar idea. Some people do this through yoga as well. Spending time in nature sounds like something a non-New Yorker would say, and it's true. Like I said, I wasn't raised in New York, but there is current research that shows that people who spend time in green space have less anxiety and less stress. And then there's actually some research that supports that it's chemically something going on with trees and with green. Maybe it's chlorophyll, maybe it's the oxygenation process. Right now in Japan, they're actually using this as legitimate therapy of taking people for walks. There are many parks in our city that provide the same thing for you. Some people find that the sound of water is also stress relieving. We've got great bodies of water around us, and also creeks, and or putting on headphones and listening to ocean waves, or doing an audio of your favorite body of water and coming to that on your headphones. Also, we live in New York City, and even if we go outside at lunch or spend time outside on the weekends, chances are we are vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D is an important component to our body systems for mood regulation. It also is involved in all sorts of other body systems, and part perhaps of a seasonal affective disorder, or by this point in the season of just feeling not your best self and more stressed than usual or more down than usual, is that you might be vitamin D deficient. I'll say before you go to CVS and buy vitamin D and start taking it, please do get your blood levels tested because it's a fat-soluble vitamin and you can actually overdose on it. So you'd want to know what your vitamin D level is first before adjusting, because it might be that you're not deficient. But it can make a big impact spending time outside. So moving our bodies can also be a tweak that can have big impact. That could be when you're stressed at your workstation to get up and go to the bathroom, get up and get water, get up and stretch. Chair yoga is a real thing. So is just swinging your arms around or making funny mouth movements or sounds to dispel or discharge that anxiety within you. So from there, I'd also just like to invite you to think about, what are your values? Sometimes our stress is uncontrollable. It's something that has happened to us or our environment. By knowing our values, it gives us a chance to kind of determine what our attitude is about our situation. A friend of mine said to me once, she's like, "This is your life." And that kind of check-in moment, it's like, oh yeah, like if I wait until everything is perfect and all tidy, I'm going to be waiting a really long time to do the things that are important to me, or to be the kind of person I think is the ideal person I want to be, right? Certainly our values are different. And so what that might look like on a day-to-day basis might be different. So let's go back to our crazy commute, which my guess is most of our days involve MTA. And God bless MTA, or, the greater being that is, or, may MTA have good luck on its side. But so we choose to take MTA to work. And because it's typically faster and cheaper than other modes of transportation, and maybe our finances are a value, having financial stability. But it's also a hassle, and it can be overcrowded. The subway can be very triggering for many people. So why go on the subway? Maybe it allows for us to have more time to be with our families before going to work. Maybe it allows for us to have more money to spend on utilities and rent. Maybe it provides us a time to regroup or to read, and that there's no other time to have that downtime in such a quiet environment as the train. So my guess is, values that may be relevant to you working for the city, and that you're not working for a corporation or for a for-profit entity, is maybe you're working for the city because you believe in the work. You believe in being a part of a community effort to make New York City a better place or a good place to live. Maybe you work for the city because the health insurance or the benefits are good, and that you want to provide for your family or for yourself and for your future to have options for retirement. Maybe it's because there's prestige in working for the city, or that you have a family legacy of working for the city. And so it's not to say that knowing your values is going to take care of those stressors, but it gives you meaning and purpose for why are you coping with the stressful work situation? Why not quit, right? And it's like, well, because working for the city might be moving you towards the things that are important to you. And we are all human. And on any given day, as humans, we are going to experience a wide range of emotions. And that's regardless of what's happening at work. And so how do we cope with this gig of being human, with all that it means? Part of that, I believe, is practicing compassion along the way. So if you'd be willing for a moment, picture a time or a place or person with whom you felt compassion, that kindness, that deep regard. Feel it in your body. Does it have a temperature? Does it have movement? Does it have a color? What would it be like to extend this experience to ourselves? What would it be like to treat ourselves the way we would treat our best friend? What would our best friends say to us at our stress? So bringing yourself back to the group. Is self-compassion selfish? Like, isn't that kind of selfish to like give yourself kindness? Isn't it, like the slide says me, like, come on, like, But actually, what we know is that the people who ruminate on self-criticism, who tend to be judgmental of themselves, they have more anxiety and depression, they have more substance use, and they're not as motivated or as productive. And so if the bottom line is getting your job done at work, taking care of that huge to-do list, does, arguing at yourself and barking at yourself for how come you didn't get it done, is it actually going to lead to productivity? And for most of us, it's not a workable strategy, and it actually, it doesn't lead to what you want. Having a moment of compassion of like, the boss added one more thing to your to-do list, and you're like, are you kidding me? To take a moment and to be like, maybe it's a big exhale of like, all right, that sucks, this sucks, right? It also could be that you take a moment, and some of us have a favorite body part to touch, workplace appropriate. Maybe it's, some people like the feel of their cheek, the top of their hand, their thumbnail. Some people put on lotion for this. Certainly there's also, I think it's worth noting, sometimes we practice compassion towards ourselves by extending our bodies in a mutual way with other people. Hugs, kisses, sex, if that's part of your world. Some people do it by wearing comfortable clothes. They know that they're on edge with what's happening at home, and before they go into work, they're like, I'm not going to wear something that is tight and constrictive and I feel horrible in. I'm going to wear my favorite shoes and my favorite outfit. And that is, that minor tweak could be sending a message to yourself of, hey, I see me, I see what's going on. Making a mug of hot tea or coffee, the ritual of making it, again, for some people could be that compassion as well. So all that said, sometimes we practice all of these things and we are overwhelmed. The stress is significant. Please call us or consider calling us at the New York City Employee Assistance Program. I'd like to share with you a bit about what we do at the EAP and demystify the process so that if and when you want to contact us, the stress or the unpredictability of what that will look like will be reduced. So the New York City Employee Assistance Program is free and confidential for you, the employees, as well as your families. We work with a wide variety of things, whether it's substance use, mental health, financial problems, domestic violence. That may look like supportive counseling. You come in person or on phone, speak with us. We'll make referrals. Sometimes it's consulting with supervisors or colleagues about a concern you have about someone else in the office. And we come out to do bereavement support, crisis management, things like that in the office as well. You can contact us by phone or by email. So when you call us or contact us, if you call, our receptionist will collect information from you and then connect you to one of our counselors. The counselor will do a brief assessment to kind of get a sense of what's going on, and then we'll schedule you for an in-person or on the phone appointment. We have office hours from 8 in the morning until 7 at night. So we hope that we can reach most folks. And then for your appointment, what we're going to do is get a sense of hopefully more of you than just this particular stressor situation. We're going to look at your emotional health, your physical health, socially, what's the context. We'll make a plan with you to next steps. For some people, that includes a referral to community providers. And for that, we make the phone calls for you. So oftentimes people will come to us looking for an ongoing therapist, someone close to home who can meet with them on the weekends or the evenings. We find someone who accepts your insurance, and then you'll see that person on non-working hours. But we'll also follow up with you to see if it was a good fit, to see if you have questions, to see how you're doing. So oftentimes people are concerned with the EAP of who do we report to, where is this information going, is this really safe? So I'm here to say that as a profession, as counselors, confidentiality is essential to have the trust happen. And that all of our communication and documentation is confidential, with a couple of exceptions. So if you are harm to yourself or someone else, if there's elder abuse or child abuse, we have to keep vulnerable people safe, and we'll break confidentiality. Sometimes people ask for us to do an attendance memo saying that they came during working hours. If you work for a mayoral agency, you can come during working hours if you've cleared it with your supervisor. We'll provide that attendance memo, but it's on you to provide that to your supervisor. Sometimes we'll provide documentation for someone who's gone on extended leave from work. Let's say you're going into an inpatient substance use treatment facility. You don't want your boss to know that you have a substance use problem, that you have a drinking problem, you have a heroin problem. You come to the EAP, you come in for the appointment, you sign releases for us to contact HR, for us to talk to that treatment facility, for us to talk to your insurance agency if that's relevant. And then we provide a documentation that just says you're out on an EAP leave. So that HR doesn't know what it is, they don't ask questions, and we don't provide answers more than just you're out on the EAP leave. Similarly, if you go out on an EAP leave, we can provide the documentation that will return you back to work, because if you've been out on a leave, you need some sort of documentation for that. And we can do that in a confidential way as well, so that it doesn't say where you were, but that you are medically cleared to return back to work. So if you have questions about that process, please write in, and we'll kind of get to those. But let's pause for just a second and take a moment to have all this kind of sink in, if you will. So we started our webinar with a mindfulness moment. We're going to go back to that by first noticing our bodies. Noticing our thoughts. Maybe letting go of those thoughts and returning back. And then noticing our emotions. So then I'd invite you from that place to come back to us and spend a moment think about highlights of this webinar. Often we participate in webinars or trainings and jut out to the next thing that our agendas are full. So take a minute and just check in. Are there any strategies or tools that we've used or talked about that resonated with you? Is there something that you can go back to work to attend to one of those stressors that you identified that you could practice, in 5 minutes from now, that you could practice once you get off the subway? Well, we'll continue to have some time for reflection, but let's see if there's also some questions that we could attend to with our time.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. That was wonderfully helpful information, and I hope it was helpful for all of you that have joined us. We would love to take some questions. Katie's here to answer some questions. So there is a chat box on the right side of your screen. You can type your question in here. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, we also want to remind you that your feedback is really valuable to help us learn, what works and what doesn't when we do these webinars. So you can copy paste the bit.ly link that's on your screen into a web browser, and we'll also be following up via email with that survey link directly, as well as the recording of today's webinar in case you want to go back and go through some of those exercises again. And lastly, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the EAP contact information. As Katie said, they're a really great resource. They're available to all city employees. We really recommend you take advantage if that's helpful to you. And so let's get started with a question that someone wrote and said, do you know if there are any illnesses that are correlated with stress, any physical ailments?
Oh, yeah. I think IBS is the first one that comes to mind. High blood pressure. I'll be honest that at one point I was a new parent and I thought that my hearing was going. And actually the audiologist was like, let's talk about how much sleep you're getting, and that my ears were fine, but my brain's ability to function was not. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's no like direct link to this. It didn't seem like, but that's how connected our body systems are.
Yeah, definitely. Those links between mind and body are very strong.
I think sometimes people get eczema, skin conditions. Skin is our largest organ. It's our direct defense, and it can break down in times of stress. Sometimes people break out in hives or acne.
Yeah, that's great. A couple of people have asked about forgetfulness and memory loss, and that being a symptom of stress. And do you have any thoughts on how to cope with that?
Yeah, I think part of it is understanding how it can take place. I think oftentimes, especially with the technology, that we have become mediocre encoders. So when we take in information, our brain kind of determines whether or not this is important enough to keep in deep storage or to kind of put to the wayside. And so the first thing is when we're distracted, I don't actually think that things are properly encoded or aren't encoded at all. So it might not even be that you're being absent-minded. It might mean that it actually never made it in there. It also, going back to kind of how technology has encouraged us to toggle, for lack of a better verb, from one thing to the next, is are we truly giving things our attention and focus to be able to engage it meaningfully, to have enough of our brain kind of connected with it that if we are distracted, that it's like, you know, different things can cue us to it, or is it just, you know, kind of, there's a small part of our brain that's not as much of a network of cueing us in. So I would say if it's something that's important to you, that you're having difficulty focusing, one idea would be to reduce the stress is like, what are the other things that are competing for your attention in that moment? You know, some of us are introverts, and external sounds in our work environment can be a distraction from being able to access memory. Some of us, it's temperature, personal demands, right? If you're a person who pays attention to text messages or emails that come in as they come in, I'd encourage you as you're at work to experiment with managing that in a different way. Again, checking in at chunks instead of just as they come in. If you're an extrovert, it could be that your work environment is actually too quiet. And then in order to be optimally performing, you need some sound and to, you know, work with your supervisor or your colleagues to be able to have headphones in or to kind of amp up that experience.
That's actually a great segue into another question we received, which is, if you're a supervisor and an employee comes to you and says that they're having job-related stress, like what's the procedure? How should you kind of manage that?
Yeah, I think sometimes depending on the situation, you can brainstorm with the person, say, are there some things that we can do here in the office to manage the stress? You know, I know some office culture is to not have headphones in, rightfully so. Some people can have headphones in. You know, if it's a minor tweak like that, it's also completely okay to say, have you considered going to the EAP or contacting the EAP? They might be a great neutral sounding board. And as a supervisor, to then be able to say, I support you taking work time to do that. Again, mayoral agencies are supported to use city time as an excused absence to come to us at our office at 250 Broadway. And we can provide the attendance memo for that. Other times people don't want to come down to the office and do a phone conversation, a phone screening or intake during lunch or after hours.
Great. What about someone said, you know, they handle their own stress with their child or their teenager deals with a lot of stress at school. You know, what can they do?
Yeah, so the EAP does work with kids. I know oftentimes people think, you know, it's just for employees, but we've had parents bring in their teenagers or bring in their middle schoolers. Parents call in about kids who are 5, and we can work with you and your family. Oftentimes it's to build, to assess what's going on and to hear from the kiddo, and then to also build buy-in for engaging in ongoing therapy in the community or to connect you and your family with some of the outstanding providers that we have that accept our city insurance.
Great. Someone had a question about if they're on an EAP leave, is that also, do they use FMLA or is that separate? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So generally, if you have sick time available or leave time available, the EAP leave would use that sick time or annual leave that you have available. Let's say you've used up that time, but you still worked for the past year at a full-time capacity. So then you'd qualify for the family medical leave, which could be for yourself or to take care of an immediate family member. And you get 12 weeks of that per year. So then it would be the EAP leave would use your FMLA. And whenever you go out on FMLA, you would need a doctor's note to return you back. And so the EAP actually functions as that. And we work with providers to have that happen so that you don't need to like facilitate it any additional way. We do the heavy lifting, if you will.
Great. So just to wrap up with one last question, a few questions came in about sleeping too much, sleeping too little from stress, and also that's about the quality of the sleep that they get when they're stressed. I know you talked about how sleep is key to managing stress. So do you have any tips for how to get restful sleep when you're coping with stress?
Yeah, man, I think that sleep problems are real. And if I had to summarize, it's a lot of people who come into the EAP, a lot of people who work at the EAP, sleep problems are real. So part of it, some of our suggestions are having a sleep routine, for kind of having that wind down time for yourself, behaviorally cueing yourself that it's time to go to sleep. It could be including not using screens for an hour before going to bed. Some people like to read in bed. Keeping your bed is only a place for sleep and not a place to eat, not a place to do crossword puzzles or check emails. So that, again, that your body's like cued in. Similarly, if you wake up, in an agitated state, often most of us try to fight it, right? Or judge it. They're like going back to those non-workable strategies. It's like, well, what's wrong with me? Oh my gosh, I've got a big presentation tomorrow. I'm not gonna be able to, it's like, and that just actually fights the situation and amps it up. So when people wake up in the middle of the night, the invitation is to do something quiet, to leave the bed if you need to. There's something called yoga nidra. It's not like pretzel yoga. It's actually like mindfully going through body systems in a rhythmic way that induces theta brainwaves, deep sleep brainwaves. Progressive muscle relaxation would be another technique. We tend to err away from sleep medications as an ongoing strategy. In terms of workability, there are some significant side effects. For some people, sleep medication is a good idea, but on a long-term basis, sleep medication often doesn't work and has some ugly side effects.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. I do want to be mindful that the hour is almost up. But just to recap and hopefully answer some of the questions that we didn't get to, the EAP, as I said, is a great resource. Katie and several of the other counselors are there. They can help with all of the things we talked about, dealing with challenging coworkers. If you need a referral to a provider in the community, their services are deep and they're here to help us as city employees. So thank you so much, Katie. Again, we will be sharing the recording and the slides so you can continue to use these tools to manage the stressors in your life. And we thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.